Hi there. So I'm going to run through what we covered for Interface Builder, and we kind of took this in our own direction and added a few extra things as well. So the first thing we want to do is create a new project, and we want to make sure that we're selecting iOS and app are the two things we want on this screen. The next screen, I'm going to call it IB Basics as the name for Interface Builder Basics. And we need to make sure you've got something in your organization identify. You can just have com.example. You don't need anything in your team. It could be none. But because I've got this set up, I could test on a real device, and I need my kind of iCloud developer account linked in here, but you could just have none. We want to make sure that the interface, few people got this wrong, is storyboards, not SwiftUI. So SwiftUI is Apple's new sort of programming language to programmatically create your interface. It's really fun, but I would suggest learning storyboards sort of first, and then maybe come to SwiftUI a bit later on when you understand how apps are sort of structured. Language, obviously Swift. We don't want this ticked, so I hit next. And then it asks me, do I want to create a Git repository? I don't want to, so make sure that's unticked. And then create. So remember, it brings us into this screen in Xcode because it's been a while since we've used Xcode. So what I want to check is I've got these kind of files on the left, so like app delegate, scene delegate, and view controller and main. If you've got something different, it's likely that you selected SwiftUI as the interface. So you need to basically like close this down and reopen it. So we can always get back to the storyboards by clicking on main. So I'm going to do that there and click on main. And let's just open this out, make it a little bit bigger. So we are going to create an app that connects a text, sort of text field where users can enter some text, and we're going to get them to press a button which will run a function and do something with the text in a label. So we're going to connect like three things together. Quite simple, but the idea being that you can build on this. So for some of the first things we want to look at is down here, it says iPhone 11. So this is the device that we're kind of like building on in this screen, the size. So like if I switch it here to iPad, then like you can see it's just blown up if I zoom out. That's kind of the iPad screen. So for now, I'm just going to go back to iPhone 11. You find a lot of Apple's courses and examples tend to use iPhone 11. And what we need to make sure is up here, that this is what we're going to simulate on. It tends to default to the first thing in the list down there. But you can see sometimes it's still default is something else. Like you might find it's defaulted sometimes to my Mac. And then when you try and run, you're going to get an error because you need a linked developer account to be able to deploy on a real device like a Mac or like a plugged-in iOS device. So just make sure that this is, for now, just the same device. So iPhone 11 at top and bottom. So the bottom is what we're designing on. The top is the simulator we're going to simulate on. And you might want to just build and run, even though we're going to get an empty screen, just to get the simulator going. A bit of a tip, if you've got into full screen, I would come out full screen. Some people got a bit lost with the simulators kind of coming up in another sort of screen, basically. So if I go Command R for run, then it's going to build and run my completely empty project on a simulator, and we can check that we're not going to get any errors, because at this stage, if you get errors, it's not really that you've made an error with coding. It's likely to be some other things. So looks like it's going to work. It's working, running. Project. If you did get errors, then you might want to come into this file up here, IB Basics, and have a look at signings and capabilities. Often where it's kind of failing, it doesn't really matter right now that I'm failing on the register bundle identifier, because we're just kind of doing this for a kind of basic project sort of learning experience, and it's to do with the fact that we need to kind of register this to be able to develop it and release it. But we don't have to worry about that for now. So we've got this empty screen. I want to add some things to it. So up here on the top right, you've got a plus button. This opens the library and we can add stuff. So the first thing I want is a text field. So I'm going to chuck this in. I'm going to use the line there to align it in the middle. And one of the buttons I want to use is down here on the bottom sort of right of this. We have this button which allows me to kind of like center it down the middle or vertically, and I have this button to the side of it which allows me to add constraints. So if I put 50, it's going to basically align it 50 from the top, and then if I put it 50 from the side and 50 from that side, then it's going to kind of pin it. There we go, to those. And that means if I rotate the phone, do you see how it's still 50, 50, 50? So it kind of adapts the design based on kind of rotation, obviously screen size as well. So the other thing I want is a button. So I like the grey ones, but you can choose different colors. So let's grab that out of the library. Now with this, I'm going to go into auto layout again down here, and I'm going to go 50. And instead of those, what we could do is maybe give it a width and a height. So width, I'm going to go 120, and height, I'm going to go 60. And I might need to add some more constraints in a minute. So one tip is that if you go over to the button next over that looks like a triangle, I'm going to add missing constraints up here. So selected views, I've got that selected, add missing constraints. And you see it kind of fixes it for me. Saves me have to spend a long time. It takes a little while to get your head around auto layout. So that is just a much quicker way of doing it when you're learning. So I'm going to add a label underneath here as well and do a similar sort of thing. So I want it maybe 50 from the thing above. Let's go 50 from the side and 50 from the other side. So it's a bit like the text field, similar sort of layout. And I'm going to give it a manual height. I'm going to enter 200 for now. Add constraints, and should be all right. Don't think I've got too many issues with it. And what I want to do is in the text field is I want to give some placeholder text so the user knows what to enter, right? I could add a label above it and give it, but that's not great because it's another thing on the screen when I can just put some placeholder text in here. So if you see I've got top right, I've got the inspector open. So if I've got the text field selected, I can get a placeholder and I'm going to say, how are you feeling today? Right? Hit return, adds it in. How are you feeling today? And with my button, I'm going to call it press me. And again, you could go through and you could change the kind of fonts and stuff like that of the press me button in there if you want to. The label, I do want to change a little bit. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. So let's go for like 24, like that. And what we're going to discover in a minute, if the text was really long, it's just going to go to the end and go ... Because if we look at the line breaking, it just says truncate tail. So it's not going to wrap it. So we want to wrap it though. But we might leave it and come back to that so we can see what it's going to do. But we will want word wrap, and we'll want to increase the lines past one line. One thing I want to do though is probably center it so it all looks nice in the center. Right, so we can build and run, get into the habit of building and running regularly, check we've not got any terrible errors. So we've got a text field that I can kind of type into, but the button doesn't do anything yet. And the label's just sort of stuck there, not doing anything. So what we need to do is be able to actually reference these user interface elements in our code. Now, when we created this sort of basic project, we get this first view controller. And I know this is the first view controller that the project is going to load to because of this arrow here. This tells me that this is the first view controller that we're going to look at, the first screen basically. So I also get this view controller file here. Now this has already been linked for me to this first file. I can see by if I click on the view controller and I open the inspector and we go to this tab, which is identity inspector, the class is view controller, which is the name of this file here. So if you do the extension activities, then I'm going to get you to create another screen and you'll need a new view controller file called like view controller 2 or something more appropriate if you want. So what we need to be able to do is see our screen and our user interface elements and the code file simultaneously so we can connect them. So what I'm going to do is click on this button up here, which has got lots of little lines, it says adjust editor options and pick assistant, like so. So now I can see the screen and my code. So what we need to do for some of the items like the text field and the label for this project kind of basically is add like a reference to it in our code. So I can reference it. I know what the label's called and the text field's called. So to do that, I'm going to hold the control button and I've got the text field. I'm going to drag a line over to my code file. Now, you can see if I try and do it on the override function viewDidLoad, it's not going to do anything. If I go up towards the top, it's not going to do anything. But if I go in between, that's where I want to reference things. What you don't want to do is go down to the bottom just yet, because that's where we're going to put actions. And that's what the button's going to do. It's going to do an action. So I want to go up here between class and the override function for viewDidLoad. So I'm going to go in there, let go. So this is going to create an outlet, which is what I want. And I'm going to name it. I'm going to name it fairly descriptive, like feeling text field. Oh, text field. Now, Apple really want you to be descriptive with your naming of things, because if you just name things like, you know, box 1, box 2, box 3, when you come to this in a few weeks, you have no idea what that means. And neither will anyone else if you pass your project over. So I'm just going to make a bit of space, and you'll see what this has done is created this thing that says IB, or at IB outlet var, so it's a variable, feeling text field is the name I gave it, right, is a type of UI text field, an exclamation mark there, right? So one of the things to be aware of, if say you're like, oh, I wish I called it something else, let's just delete this, you're going to have a problem, right? Because while you've deleted this code, the reference still exists. And if the reference exists, but the code doesn't, your app will crash. So it's Apple kind of trying to protect you from kind of like having an app with things that are not connected to the right things or connected to anything. One thing I can do as well is if you hover over the circle there next to it, it shows what it's connected to. So it shows it's connected to that just there. So one of the things to be aware of if you do delete this accidentally is what you're going to need to do is click on this, go to the inspector, go to the last thing in the list, this kind of button here, that's for connections. You'll see down here referencing outlets, feeding text field, that's the name I gave it. You'll need to delete this connection basically if you've deleted the text, and you want to start again and do a new one basically. So you need to delete the sort of code, and then you need to come in here and actually from here delete the connection. If you don't, your app will crash. It's really common. Loads of students already had that. So I'm going to do the same for label. So control drag, same area, put them all together, and let's call this output label. All right, so it's quite clear what it is and what it's for. And then what I want to do is I am going to control click from the button, but this is what I want to do an action. I want it to make something happen. So I'm going to move that down here. So not up there, below the override viewDidLoad function. And you'll notice this time, instead of an outlet, it's pre-selected action, right? And I'm going to name it, let's name it press me button pressed, right? So it's the name of the button, and it's also the action button pressed, right? Because this is going to really help us later on to just know what everything's doing, because we now know this is a button that's been pressed when it happens. The event touch them aside is fine, but you can change these to kind of different ways that people can interact with certain elements. But just leave that as it is, and the sender can be left as it is for now, and hit connect. So we're literally just putting in the name. Now, notice how this is different. These are just variables. So this is just literally a way of naming that the text field and the label. But this is different. It's a function. We've not actually covered these yet, but functions allow us to do things. So what we want to do to start with is connect our text field to our label. So whatever's written in the text field comes out of the label. So to do that, we are going to say the label, right? And I need to actually use the name I gave it. So output label. Now this is the thing, you'd think I can just go equals, right? But the label actually has a lot of properties that we could access, like its background color, its foreground color, you know, font, stuff like that. It's got a lot of properties that we could access, alignment, all that sort of stuff. So I need to say the property I want to access is the label's text. So we use this dot notation syntax. So I've got the dot there, dot text, right? So I'm accessing the output label, which we referenced up here, connected to the label. And I want to access the label's text is what I want to access. And I want to set that to the text field. Now I named the text field feeding text field. And you see the auto completion comes up. I've not finished writing. It's guessing that's what I want. So I'm going to hit return to put it in really quickly. And the same thing again, .text. And students, I had like made this mistake. I made this mistake loads, forgetting to put what the thing is you want to access. Because with the text field, it's fairly obvious. You probably want to access the text, but not always, essentially. So let's try building and running. So if I put in great, press B, great. Do you see it change the label? Now, one thing we might want to do is, now that it's working, just delete the word label. So it's an empty label. Let's reload it, because it was a bit weird having a label written here before we did anything. Let's go awesome, press B, awesome. So we can do that. One of the other things that we might want to do is actually add some text to it. So what I'm going to do is start some sort of speech marks to create a string. And I'm going to say, you are feeling a space. And then what I need to do is have space and a plus. So I'm going to add this string of you are feeling with a space. I'm going to add it to feeling textfield.text. Now what you'll see is I've got an error here. And we haven't covered this, but this is to do with optionals, which is to do with things that potentially could contain nil. So if do you see I've got the error here? If I click on the dot, it gives me some options. Now, usually you avoid using the exclamation mark for some wrap, but if you read the documentation on text fields, you'll learn that they always contain an empty string. And even though it's an empty string, that is not nil. It's still something. Basically, it's been initialized. So we can actually just force and wrap. And for now, we're not going to go into optionals because it's a lot further in the course. But let's just use the fix button on that one. If you're wondering what the double question mark here, the coalescing operator, basically what we could do with this is provide like a fallback, like an option. So what if it is nil? If it's nil, then on the other side, you could give it a default value, but let's just use the exclamation mark for now. So hit fix, and it puts the exclamation mark just at the end there. And then if we give it a second, the error goes away. So now if we build and run, so we've got this kind of thing. If we just look at the code file, so you can kind of see what it looks like as a sentence. You got output.label.text, right, is going to be you are feeling with a gap plus feeding text field. So whatever we put in the text field is going to get added to this little sentence here. So if we go, let's just go back here and run it. Right, so if I put great, you're feeling great. Yeah, so that's kind of fun. Now, what happens if we're kind of stuck here? Like I could kind of go and get rid of that and press me. And now I get like, you are feeling with nothing. It doesn't make a lot of sense. We'll fix that in a minute. But it would be nice to have like a refresh button to kind of zero all this stuff. So maybe stop the video now and just have a think. How could you add a new button called refresh that's going to empty the label and the text field? So hopefully if you decided to stop the video, you might have had a think about it. Still think about it, then let's put a label in. So I'm going to go to the plus sign. So not a label, button. So I'm going to add a new button. I'm going to chuck it down here, and I'm going to use the constraints, and I want to give it the same height and width as the other button, so it's nice and consistent. So 120 and 60. And let's go 50 from the bottom, add constraints, and then I'm going to be lazy and go to the triangle button and just add missing constraints. There you go. So it's kind of, it's going to look good. So let's call it refresh. Right, so you've got refresh. And then what I want to do is connect this to my code, obviously, and it's an action. I want it to do something. So it's going to, instead of going up here with the IB outlet, it's going to go down here. Just don't put it in this function because it needs to be a different function. So it could go above, or if you find it just there between these braces, it can go there. This time we'll call it refresh button pressed, right? And let's connect. So again, and what I didn't point out earlier is you need to make sure when you're writing your code for your button, do you see how it says IB action func, press me button pressed, then the sender, what's in here is kind of like the input, and then you've got these opening closing sort of curly braces. This is between those is where you need to write your code of what that button's going to do. It's the same with this. So we've got refresh button, sender dot sort of any, and then I've got the brackets there. So that is inside here is where I need to write my code. So if you thought about it, hopefully you realize that you could just say text field, or what do we call it? Feeding text field is what we call it. Feeding text field dot text, because that's the one I access, equals empty string. And we could do the same for the label. So we could say output label dot text equals empty string. So now if we rerun our program, let's have a look. So let's put in great, press me, you're feeling great. So we get that extra string that we added, hit refresh, and it kind of empties the label in the text field. So that's kind of nice. What we could also do is provide the user some visual feedback as to how it's going. And one of the things we wanted to fix is, and this is why you need to test your apps out, is if I just hit press me, it says you're feeling, which doesn't make any sense. So this is a great opportunity to test out the kind of control flow stuff. Because what we want to say is, well, if the text field is empty, then don't really do anything or send a message to the user saying like you haven't entered any text, right? So we want that to happen in our press me button pressed when we press this button. So let's just move this down, create a bit of room. So we can say if, right, and now we need our condition for our control statement. So if feeling text field dot text, now this is where we can use a new thing that you're not coming across, dot is empty, right? Then what we want to do is run some code in here, if empty, right? And then we want our else statement, and we want to run the code that we wrote earlier in here basically. So let's just check what we got here. No, it should be fine. We did that earlier, it's fine. Oh, hang on a bit. See, this is one of the things. See, one of the things that you can get confused about is, so it's giving me all this kind of stuff about optional types, and then there's an error that's been created down here. All that it is I'm missing closing off this function. So I just need to add, we go back over here, one of those. Let's bring it back there. So now we should see these go away. By the way, if you can hear the explosions, it's bonfire night, so they're kind of just going off. So we've now closed off that there. And again, with these kind of optionals and things like that, let's just get rid of that. And what it thinks is that there's a potential that this could be empty. So we could always fix it with the for some wrap for now with the exclamation marks. Let's just put that in, and hopefully it should work and be fine. There you go. So what we're saying is if feeding text field dot text, and we've used the exclamation mark there instead of the question mark, because Xcode is thinking this thing could be empty, actually it could be completely nil. So we've not really covered this on the course, but you can just do that as a fix for now. Dot is empty. So if the feeding text field is empty, then we want to run some code in here, right? And if it's not empty, then we do our code that we already wrote, basically. So one of the things we could do, which would be kind of visual and fun, is maybe turn the app red to annoy them. So let's go. Now, one of the things we can do is affect the background view. So if you look in the document outline here, we can see that actually all these things, all our buttons and stuff like that, are held within this thing called view. So we can access properties of the view. So let's say, well, if it is empty and they've hit that button, then let's say view.background color equals dot red. There's a simple way of accessing some simple colors. We could also put something in the label, and we could say output label dot text is going to equal you need to enter your feelings. There we go. So let's just build and run and see what we get. So I'm not going to put anything in, just hit press me. Oh no, it goes red. And you see, now this is one of the things we said we would fix. Do you see how it does this dot 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 because it goes beyond the end of the kind of view for the label? So we can fix that. So it's gone red, and we get you need to enter your feelings basically. And we can refresh, and the color doesn't go away. So we can fix that in a minute. But to fix the label, let's grab the label, open the inspector, and go to these kind of 3 lines. Gives us all the options. So what we want to do is we want the line break to do a word wrap, right? So it gets to the end of the line and it kind of wraps the next word down below, and increase the line. So let's go to 5 lines. That'll do, right? So now if I rerun the code and we just press me, we get, so with this, let's just stick in a, I don't think that's going to fix it actually. Might just get rid of this for now because we're only adding this for fun. And we will probably need to go into optionals to be able to kind of cover this stuff properly. Let's just try it. No, it's not going to like it. So we'll get rid of the text, but we can still do the colors, which is what we were doing in the session. So let's get rid of that for now because we need to go into optionals before we get to that. So we'll just rerun it and check that we don't have the same problem with our code. So it still does that. So what we want to do is be able to, for a start, we want the refresh button to refresh the colors as well and things like that. So it shouldn't really be crashing now. Let's have a look. So we've got press me feeding.text. Text is empty. Put .text you're feeding. Text field. I'll put label .text equals. It shouldn't be. Spelled correctly. Oh, so right, I can see what we've done wrong here. At some point I've deleted the label, and you see it's crashing like I said earlier on because you see this isn't connected anymore, so it's crashing our code. So if we just undo, it was simpler than I was thinking actually. I was thinking we should be able to get away with this without going into optionals. Is it going to, if we go back this far, we didn't get that far actually, I don't think. Let's just have a look. Right, so what we're going to do is, let's get rid of that, and we'll have to create a new label. So, and these are the kind of things that you will run into when you're kind of, working on ideas and stuff like that. So let's just quickly fix this. So we've got 50, 50, 50, and we want a height of like 200, so it's a fairly large box. And add 4 constraints, and I'm going to just reset that so it's nice and neat. So what we did is we had this in the center, and then we increased the font size, I think, to like 24 or something, so it's a bit bigger so we can read it better. Then we truncated the tail by word wrap, and we also then want to increase the lines on it, so we get more lines. So that's what we want there. And then I'm going to connect it to the code and give it the same name, so we have to rewrite everything. Output label, label. There we go. Connect. Now let's just try running, and well, actually we need to finish this bit code off again. So we wrote this earlier. So if feeling.textfield.text is empty, then we want to run some code here. So what we did is we did view.background color equals .red to turn the background red, and I don't think we did much else to it. And then we want else. So we've got our kind of control flow statement. So we've got if feeding text field right .text is empty. Let's change that to that one. Then we're going to turn the background red, and we just need to add another one of these, just like earlier, to finish it off. So if I click it, I can see it closes off this function like that. And let's have a look. That should go away, I would have thought, because we've got what it's asking for now. Sometimes Xcode gets stuck on things. Come on. There we go. So if I just build and run, do you see the error went away? So if we just hit press me, it goes red. If I hit refresh, now we're not getting that crashing. That crashing was because what I mentioned right at the beginning of the session, that if you get these IB outlets and you break the connection, it's going to crash your code. And I hadn't noticed that at some point, obviously deleted the label, and that I broke that connection. That's what was happening there. So we could do some other things, like maybe if they do put in a feeling, then I'm going to say view.background color equals .green. So we're going to change the colors. And what I want to do obviously is be able to reset that. So my refresh button, I'm going to say view.background color equals .white. Yeah, so now if we run it, we get how are you feeling? Great. Press me, goes green because I'm feeling great. If I just press it, let's do refresh, so it goes back to white. And if I just press it, it goes red. And we could give them a message there. So let's, in here, so if it's empty, we've changed it to red. And let's also add output label.text equals enter feeling. There we go, enter feeling. Really angry, and the page is going to go red. Here we go. So if I press that, enter a feeling, goes red. Refresh. If I actually put something in, awesome, press me. There you go. One of the things you could figure out is what if I put a capital letter for awesome, I hit that, and then suddenly I've got capital there. It doesn't really make sense, but you can actually solve this if you think about one of the things we covered with .lowercased, with the open and closed parentheses, to see if you can figure that one out by yourself, how we can actually take this and make it lowercase there, what they enter, so the sentence works better. So one of the things you could do if you've got this far, then the extension task is basically to create another screen and link them together. So what we're going to do is create a new screen. To do that, I'm going to go up to the library, the plus sign, and I'm going to say view controller, drag it out. So I've got another screen now. And what I want to do is create some navigation to navigate from this one to that one. Now we've done it before with a tab view controller, so you could select like lots of controllers like these, like that at the same time. and we can go here and we can go to tab bar. We've done that in the first week. What I'm going to do now is do a different style. So I'm going to select this first view controller here, go to this button down here, and this time I'm going to click navigation controller. And it adds in this new kind of overlaid navigation controller. And you need to do that to get the next bit to work really properly how we want it to work. So I'm going to add a button to this that's going to transport us to the next screen. So this time I'll add a different button so we can differentiate it. So let's put the button there. And I'm just going to call it screen 2 because I don't really know what my app's about yet. And we could add some like auto layout stuff to it. So let's go 120 by 60. And let's go 50 from the button below because that's what we've been doing so far. And then I'm going to go to the triangle and just add missing constraints to save some time. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I want to see the controller I'm going to and the button. I'm going to control drag from here to there. Do you see? So I've on my button, I'm going to control drag to there. Let go. Now it gives me an option. The one we want to do really to start with is show. And some of them do different things, like present modally will do a lot if you want like a screen to pop up from the bottom and then like, you know, you want them to swipe it down out of the way when they've seen what's on there. But let's just go show. And watch what happens. This pops in back. Now, that popped in because we set this up as a navigation controller on this first one. So it knows that if we click with this button to go to there, then actually we probably want to just go back at some point. So if we run this, and let's just hit press me, right, to turn the screen red. So when I hit screen 2, it takes me over to the new screen. And if I hit back, it takes me back to this screen. Yeah, screen 2, back. Simple, right? Now, the next thing we want to do is if you wanted to create a new thing on this page over here on the screen, this view controller, we need a new view controller file. So this file is linked to this view controller here with all our functions and our outlets. But what if you wanted to create a new screen that does something different? Then you need a new view controller file. So we want to go up to File and New and File. So File, New, File, or Command N, save time eventually. And we want a Cocoa Touch class is what you want. And then when you come onto this screen, it's really important that you get the subclass of correct. So we want a subclass of UI view controller. If it doesn't say that, then you need to go and change this to, because it could be some other things, but we want UI view controller. And I'm just going to call it 2, but you should call it something much more descriptive. I just want to decide what my app's really about or what the second screen's about. But you might want to call your view controller file something actually way more descriptive than this. So the language is obviously Swift. So I'm going to click next and then just hit create. Now I've got this second file, so if I go back here, now what I need to do now is associate this second view controller. Do you see it's still loading up to this? It needs to be connected to this view controller 2 file. So what I'm going to do is select view controller up here, open up the inspector over here, and then go on to this identity inspector window. Right, so open the inspector, then go to the identity inspector while having this new view controller screen selected up here. And you can see it's got no class, right? So now we're going to go in here and we could kind of scroll through and sort of find view controller 2 is what we're looking for. So let's just search for view controller 2. Do you see it's there in the list? So let's select that. And now this, so if I just write like a comment in here, let's just put it up here. This is a comment, right? Now we should see that, do you see this is a comment? So this second view controller file is now linked with your second screen. And what you could do is, this is kind of over to you now, is to actually go and build a similar sort of thing, but that does maybe something slightly different on this second screen, basically. So practice your text fields and how you can get them to output to labels and use buttons to do things and, you know, change stuff around and things like that with code. And you can kind of just get cracking in this file, you could just get rid of this stuff down here, really. We don't really need it. So let's get rid of that. And you can see same thing again, that if I just stick something in for a second, like a label, that I can control drag out up here for my outlets. So I'm just referencing things. And if it was a button, I want to go down here because it's going to do an action when you press it. So that's it, really. Hopefully it was a bit of a whistle-stop tour. And what was quite good is I accidentally deleted the label, and it took me a minute to figure out what was wrong with it. Looked like the code was crashing it because we were getting errors, but it was actually as simple as I'd accidentally deleted the label. And the main thing that was causing the crash is I'd broken this connection between the outlet and the user interface element. If you break the connection, then it will crash your app when you try and load it, or when you click that thing that is not connected to it. Will, like it was happening with me, I had to press the button and then suddenly it would crash. It actually did load it. So hopefully that's a bit of an overview. So try and build this, and then as an extension, see if you can add another screen. Obviously you could add loads of buttons. The buttons could be images as well. They don't have to be buttons necessarily. They could kind of behave like images that you press and it takes you to different screens. And obviously you could have loads of screens off of this first screen. And then you could embed, if you wanted to, you could embed this in a navigation controller and have this second screen go off to like more sub screens if you wanted to, with more buttons doing that same thing. And it gives you this nice navigation thing up here as well. So good luck.